Hello, hello. Welcome back to Liberation Live. I'm Sharon, and I'm very, very excited for you to be with me today. Let me fix my hair, okay? All right, so I'm Sharon. As I said, this is Liberation Live, my podcast. And if you're tuning in to Liberation Live via audio, via Apple, Spotify podcast, anywhere you can listen to podcasts, thank you so much for joining me again. I've had that podcast under God Podcast. I just renamed, rebranding a little bit. I've had that podcast since 2020, a little COVID vibe. But now I am expanding my wings to YouTube. Can you believe it? I know, I can't either. God done drugged me over here, okay? He done drugged me over here, but I'm here, okay? So thank you so much for joining me. If you haven't subscribed yet and you are tuning in on YouTube and you're seeing my pretty face, what you waiting on? Like, hit the subscribe button. I got a lot more coming. Like, get ready. Okay? Now, I'm going to now be like combining my podcast and the YouTube channel. It's all going to be Liberation Live. Very excited about it. We have so many amazing topics coming. And for those of you that don't know, I am an ordained minister. I am a teacher, evangelist. And so I'm going to be talking about a lot of good, juicy topics. And it's not just going to be on like things you always hear. My channel's not going to be, my podcast is not going to be like everything else that's out there. I can promise you that. I'm going to talk about things that, you know, we don't hear enough about and get into the nitty gritty so that you can walk away understanding things that you've never known. Feel empowered and more hungry to learn about the things of God. And even if you are not a Christian, this is still for you, because this is for people that have walked through the journey of life and they desire more. They want to know more. They want to have greater understanding. And if that's you, this is for you. And you'll get a chance to learn and come in at any point of your journey, no matter where you are, seasoned or unseasoned. I try my best to pick up in a place where you can understand, right? And so today, well, let me just recap real quick. Now, for those of you listening on audio, I had a first episode to a series that you don't know about. I'm so sorry. Called Spiritual Warfare. It's on spiritual warfare. The entire thing. I can't even say it's on a specific topic within spiritual warfare because of the fact that I just lost my train of thought. Don't you hate when that happens? It's not on a specific topic of spiritual warfare. It's going to be on a range of topics for spiritual warfare, right? And so I already did a first episode last week. If you haven't heard it, you can see it and hear it on YouTube under Liberation Live. Today, and FYI, that episode discussed what is spiritual warfare. Now, if you already feel like you have a good idea of what spiritual warfare is, you can skip out on that episode, because I really break down kind of like the basics of, you know, what is spiritual warfare, and like scratching at the surface of why we, no matter who you are, no matter what your background is, whether you're a Christian or not a Christian, you are in spiritual warfare. We all are. And now what you're doing in that war, that is a different topic, but we are all in this thing called war. Okay. Some people call it life is hard and it's a battle. Other people call it, I don't know, but you know what I'm saying. We all in it. Right. And so, I try to give a breakdown of it from that perspective so all people can participate in the conversation, right? Now, what I'm going to be discussing today is I'm going to be talking about my testimony when it comes to spiritual warfare. The Lord really pressed this on me because one, he pressed on me that we needed to have a series on spiritual warfare because not enough people know how spiritual warfare works. Sometimes they hear the phrase spiritual warfare and it just sounds so spooky. Like, you know what I mean? People immediately are like, whoa, wait a minute. Not interested. Not interested. And so it's kind of like he wanted me to make the topic accessible to folks. Of course, take the spookiness out of it, but also, still tell the truth of what we're dealing with, because that's important. And so that's what I'm going to do. And then my testimony, which this episode is about, is important because I feel like as leaders, in ministry, often what I feel like I'm always seeing when I go to different services, I've seen different folks preach in the past from, all kinds of leaders from every background. This is not just a specific denomination. This is not a specific race. This is just what I've seen as a whole. Sometimes we get up on those platforms and we make it seem as if we have never failed a battle. We make it seem like we come out victorious from A to Z every time. And, when we do that, what it does is it does a few things. It puts us up on a pedestal and sometimes can make people idolize you because they see you as a superhuman, right? And a pastor never misses. And the fact is, it's just not true. And as a leader, I'm friends with leaders that are in ministry. I know what the real conversations are and what we really go through, what we struggle with. And we don't get up and be transparent. And what ends up happening is it hurts the body of Christ because we come in a lot of times weak in what we're dealing with, and we need to see some humanity in the person that's speaking and some evidence that you understand where we are at. But if it feels like, no, I don't understand that, but I'm always winning. I'm too blessed to be stressed, never stressed, right? Like that kind of person, it doesn't compute. Like the math isn't mathing. It's not mathing. Because we're human and we all fail. We all mess up. We all, none of us come out the battle insanely, just never losing. It's not realistic. And I just want to bring some transparency to that, right? And some truth to the topic. But from the other side, I'm not going to say that I don't understand why leaders do this, because leaders feel like they don't have a choice, because the moment they show their humanity to people that are not leaders, and they catch them at a weak point, whether they catch them at it or they tell you about it, a lot of times, I always say familiarity, it breeds contempt with humans, because it's like the closer we get to a leader who we might have respected and honored at one point, the closer we get to them, and the more they are with us, the more they are in our lives, the more they minister, but become more and more human to us, and we see more and more of their humanity, we begin as humans to dishonor them. We begin to get too familiar with them. And even though they called by God and the hand of God is on their lives and they are anointed to do what they do, we say, oh, you just another person like me. Oh, you weak in this and I'm strong in that. I can do what you do, boo. I don't have to respect you. I ain't gotta do it. Like, I ain't gotta. And that's what usually happens. And so leaders are like, well, I can't even show my weakness, because if I show my weakness, they're going to hold it against me, hold it over my head. Then when I try to minister to them later, they can't hear it, they can't receive it, and I get seen as weak or this or that. And I completely understand that. I've been through it. But one thing about it is that even though I've been through that, I do not allow those situations to make me lose my transparency, because these are just the faults of humans. Like this is not my problem. That's their problem. Because here's the thing, God hasn't found a qualified human being to use yet. None of us are qualified. No leader is qualified. If he picks you tomorrow and if you're chosen today, you not qualified either. None of us qualified. So, what does that tell us, right? You're going to see a leader be weak. You're going to see them be human. You're going to see them sin. You're going to see them mess up. You're going to see them miss the mark. That's what sin is. It means to miss the mark. You're going to see them do that. Get used to it, but still honor what's on their life when they share with you. Okay? Please. And it doesn't have to be in the form of a testimony while they're standing on stage for you to still honor what's on their life. If they come down to where you're at and you catch them hit a low, you catch them at the bottom. I don't know where I'm parking here, but I'm parking here real quick, right? If you catch them at a low, don't take away what's on their life. They can still bless you and they can still lift you up. God can still use them in a mighty way. And if we look at the word and we see the leaders that God used, none of them were qualified. They were all kind of messed up. Yet we use them every day in our lives to be, and God uses them every day in our lives to be perfected by his word. They were the people that he chose. Yet if Moses, David was around you on any given Sunday and you found out that they had done the things that they had done, and David killed so and so, and another one did this or that, another, you know what I mean? Like, would you still hold them to the level that they should? Would you still hold their office with respect and honor and not treat them with contempt because they shared? Okay, I just parked there for way too long. Okay, I'm sorry, but but I felt like that was important for me to explain, because it's just something that happens way too often. Okay, so I'm gonna share my testimony, not the whole thing, child, because we would need we would need like a year, okay, for real. But I'm gonna share just like an overview so that you can learn from my story, and then also so that you can kind of find yourself in it. You know what I mean? Where are you at in your walk? Where are you at in the war? All of us have a role to play in the battle. And God wants us in a certain place in that battle. He wants us to be able to learn to win those battles. But God is realistic, right? He knows that you have to be trained and you have to be processed to learn how to win a spiritual battle, because your enemy, the devil, okay, he's real. All right, I'm gonna talk about that another day. He's real. Your enemy, the devil, he is very good at this. He's very good at this. Okay, he's been doing this for thousands of years. Boo boo, you just what, 20 something, 30 something, 40 something. I don't know how old you are, but you can't win against him without Christ. You can't. There is nobody who is unsaved or saved if you do not know how to deploy the weapons of God and you do not know how to study your word to know how to take advantage of the weapons that need to be deployed, and you don't know how to not just read but hear and listen to the word and the ministering of God to know how to win the battle, you gonna lose. You gonna lose every time. Every time you gonna lose. And I know, because I was a chronic loser at the battles. Okay, I was terrible at spiritual warfare. And I can say that and not have any shame at all, because the honest truth is every last one of us will be terrible at spiritual warfare if we do not know how to deploy our weapons. And so I'm going to share my story about being a chronic failure at spiritual warfare. Now, what I love about God is that he speaks a thing, and right at that very second, it does not look like what he's saying is the truth. Sometimes God says stuff and even when you read his word and he says things, you're like, but God, that's not what's currently. I know what you say is what matters, and you're God. So what you say is the facts. But I'm looking at the situation right now, and right now where it's at, the two not matching. They don't match. They mismatch. They straight mismatch. You're saying that so-and-so's gonna win, but right now so-and-so's losing miserably. I mean bad. Like they look like they about to die. And you're like, you shall live and not die. And you're like, they're literally dead. I love that about God. I swear I love that about him, because it's like one of my favorite things. How he can say something and you have to look at it, because and understand you can't lean on your own understanding. You can't, because let me move on. So in my own situation, I can say in my walk, I was the chronic failure at spiritual warfare, but throughout the walk and throughout me losing those battles, I literally lost, and God didn't deny that I would lose, but he would come in and say, you're not a failure, even though I had clearly lost 6 battles in a row. Like 6, like mad bad. I was just losing. Like I just had L like on my forehead. It lived there. And he would come in and say, you're not a failure. And I struggled to hear him, because I had no history that matched what he was saying. But he was speaking about my future and what he had placed inside of me. And the thing about it is, we know that as believers, but for some reason we just often can't connect the two. And so what ends up happening is we don't believe him. And that's because of the fact that as humans, we are naturally bent toward unbelief. We have a natural bend toward unbelief. And that is because of our ancestors. Thank you, Adam and Eve. Thank you. They made us that way. It is a gene that don't stop, okay? We all suffer from doubt and unbelief as humans, because it is the very first sin we see in the word. It's the very first one. God said one thing, the enemy comes in and causes them to doubt. They believe the lie. Okay, that's the first thing the enemy did. He lied. And it caused us to, wait a minute. Because when he comes in, he knows the advantage the enemy has is he knows what it looks like. He knows how God works. Okay? We sometimes forget that the enemy, we don't know for how long, but the enemy was at one point, up there with God, and he got a chance to see how God works. And he knows that our bend naturally as humans, that we don't think as he does, we don't understand as God does, and he knows he has that to his advantage, so he can say things to us, and he knows how to play upon our emotions because he knows that we don't understand quite how and why God does the things that he does, how he does it, and he takes advantage of that moment at the most opportune time and hits you where you are weakest, and causes you to boom, buckle. And then it's like he just starts hitting you with the 1-2 punches after that, if you don't know how to do what you do in God, you going down. You're gonna go down, right? And so what that means is, ahead of time, you have to get prepared for what it is that the enemy is going to throw at you. You have to hope for the best and plan for the worst. Okay? That's what you're going to have to do when you go into spiritual warfare. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. Okay, so back to my testimony. Now, my testimony is a really unique one because, as I said, I was a person that coming up, I was often discouraged as a kid. I was surrounded by a lot of negativity, people that have a natural bend toward negative thinking and negative mindsets. And I began to pick up the habit of negative mindsets from my environment, and negative thinking from my environment. And often because of the fact that I had experienced a lot of disappointment in my childhood, it caused me to expect disappointment. Because I had never seen a male figure in my life mean what he say, and I never really seen them, maybe excluding one person, and even then there was a lot of disappointment around that one person. I never got a chance to see them do the things they said that they would do to where I could believe what they were saying to me. And this was hard. This was really hard for me because of the fact that as a kid, you trust initially. You naturally trust initially, but because you keep experiencing disappointment, and because you're lending out your trust to people, naturally believing, and they fail at meeting the expectation that you have, you begin to feel that you can't trust people. You can't trust them at their word when they say things. And this is important because by the time God comes along and he begins to talk to me about what he's going to do in my life, I struggled believing what he said. And when he would give me a promise, I struggled believing what he said, because I was the little girl that waited, at the front step. And I love my dad with all my heart. Okay. But I was the daughter that waited at the front step, and sometimes dad show up and sometimes dad don't show up. Sometimes daddy ain't showing up because he doing something else. I don't know. Right. And I'm there with my suitcase or my little backpack, packed and I think we're going to wherever, and he didn't show up. After that happening so many times, it caused me to say, I cannot trust male figures, right? And that's what happened to me. So thank God that for deliverance, right? But that's what happened to me initially. That's what happened. And so as I began to grow and I began to get to know God, and he would make promises to me, I struggled receiving them. And even when I did receive them, I struggled believing that I was worthy, which none of us are worthy, but I struggled believing that I could do the things he said that I could do. And I struggled to even complete little small tasks because remember I said I grew up with a lot of negativity, hearing a lot of negativity, and that caused me often to not complete things, not believe in myself. And I would say, God, why are you choosing me? But God chooses the foolish things to confound the wise, right? One thing that's interesting about God, and I heard this one pastor say this in a book that was so good to me. And he said, God likes to stack the cards against himself. God likes to stack the cards against he likes to make the situation as like the situation will start out bad, and it's like God will come in and make it look be like worse, because he needs you to understand that you didn't do it when he turns the situation around, and that he's the God of the impossible. So he's going to create and stack cards up to an impossible level where you have no choice but to understand, and everybody that's watching has no choice but to understand and give him the glory that you didn't do it, they didn't do it, only he could have done it, right? And my background is literally that. Like my background is literally like, if you've seen where I came from, it's like, how did you get here? How? And I can't wait to share more of those things with you guys. But I was a chronic failure at different tasks. I was failing in school as a kid. I had to have my grandparents used to have to come over and give me talks on, girl, why are you failing? Why do you have an F? Why do you have a D? I know you're smart. Why? Right? And it followed me for a long time. And I remember that even though FYI I was smart, but it was because, again, I didn't believe in myself. And so a lot of times I would say, well, why even bother studying this? I'm not going to get it anyhow. Why even bother trying to figure out this formula for this math test? I'm not going to understand it. I'm not good at math. I can't do it. You know what I mean? And so that defeated mindset, would manifest across different parts of my life. And it's so funny because I had no idea that when God was calling me, which I found out at a very young age. I was 12 when I had like a very miraculous conversion. But that doesn't mean I've been saved for real since I've been 12. I gave my life to Christ, but I went through a lot of things over the years in between time, in the meantime. Okay. But I can remember, him telling me he was calling me and me being excited, but also bewildered. Why would you choose me? Like, why would you? I was so bewildered by it. Because I knew who I was, or I thought I knew who I was, but and who he was saying I was, they weren't matching up. Right. And so the fact that I was chronically failing in my life meant that as I began to get closer to God and I would begin to walk with God, I would find that I would struggle to get through the different tests that he would give me. I would struggle to get through the processing that we are all required to go through when we walk with Christ, right? So I'm going to give you an example of this. I can remember I would give my life to Christ because I was, FYI, a chronic backslider back in the day. Okay. I can remember, if I told you the amount of times when I was a teenager to my early 20s, mid 20s maybe, of times I had to go up to the front of the church to renew giving my life to Christ. I would need a legal pad. I went up there, so it was so many times because I struggled to get it right. And what would happen was, and I really hope this is a blessing to somebody, but what would happen was I would say, okay, God, I'm in it. Like, it's me and you. It's me and you. And I'm not going nowhere. Like, I would be so on fire and excited, and I meant it. But I would be so moved by my emotions. I was emotional, right? Emotions can only carry you so far. There has to be a level of commitment that a lot of times I don't even know that young people really understand. There are some people that get saved young and they understand the commitment. Not to mean that they're perfect, but they get it. But I think those people are very few and far between. I understood the commitment and I wanted it in my heart so bad. But then I would go to school, I get with my friends, and they like, yo, you want to hit the club? They like, yo, you want to go on a double date with this guy? You want to do, you know what I mean? And then the temptation would creep in and I would struggle so bad to overcome all this temptation. And I will say, as a younger person, that temptation is really hard. It's really hard to overcome that kind of temptation. Because, once you get older, the amount of activity happening in your life lessens as you do life more and more and you have more adult responsibilities. But when you're younger, those temptations feel like they're coming a mile a minute and it's a million of them coming, so you're just like ducking and dodging every second. And so it can feel like you're being tested constantly. And so you might have passed the test at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and 2 o'clock. By 6 o'clock, you didn't set a million no's and you're weak. And by, 8 o'clock, you give it in and saying yes. Right. And that's really common. And so as a result, I made a habit, and it became a habit for me to walk with Christ, but then to begin to vacillate and go back and forth on my vow to walk with Christ and stay with him. And so I would study the word. I had this teen study Bible and I would study all the time, and I loved it. You know what I mean? Like I really loved it. And I would be with him, and it might last for a few months, but then I would go to school or whatever, and I would get weak because I was moved by my emotions, and my temptations would overpower me, and I would look back to the things I used to do, and I would want it and desire it and want to have what I thought was having fun. I would want to be a part of that because sin was fun. I'm not going to be the person to say that sin was. If sin was fun, it was fun. It was destructive, very destructive, but it was fun to me. I'm telling you the truth of where I was at, right? And so but then I would pay for it. I would pay for it because the torment that would come with those things later as you kept doing it would be so destructive. And then you would find yourself running back to Christ, missing Christ, needing Christ. And because you had now entered the war in your walk with Christ, right? Because once you join forces with God and you come to be with him, you get enlisted in the army. And now you used to be on the side of darkness, whether you realize it or you don't. And I talked about that a little bit in the first episode. Whether you realize it or you don't, you were playing on the side of darkness, and now you're playing on the side of light. And so the enemy is hitting you with everything he has. And now you're on his radar, because now, he wants to make sure you're never going to reach the purpose and the promises that God has for you. He's going to make sure he wants to make sure you don't reach that destiny. He wants to make sure that, honestly, he really wants you to end up where he's at. And if he can't make you end up where he's at, then he's going to give you a heck of a time making it to glory. Right. And that's if you don't know how to deploy the weapons. And for many years, I didn't know how to overcome the battle, and I didn't know how to overcome the temptation. Right. And so I battled with a lot of different things in my life, a lot of different strongholds, that some of them were generational. Other things were just bad habits that I had picked up and learned, and sins that I was dealing with, secret sins, open sins I was dealing with. And I couldn't figure out how in the world to get to freedom. But the one thing that I had that gave me an advantage was that I loved God in my heart, like for real. Even though I struggled to follow the commands and I struggled to follow what he was telling me to do, I would fall down and I would get back up. I would fall down. I might stay down for a few months, but I'm going to get back up. I never, ever, ever stopped getting back up. Right. And so with me and the enemy, it would just be like this constant boom, 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 knock me over, knock me over, knock me over. But I knew he was sick of me, because he would knock me over, but he knew I was going to get back up. Like you couldn't permanently knock me over. You can knock me down, but I'm going to get back up. At some point, I'm going to get back up, and I'm going to go run to the Father, and I'm going to go weep at his feet, and he's going to save me out of this. And that would be how I got through my battles for a really long time. To the point sometimes where it would be like, it wasn't that I was winning, but it was that God was still keeping me, because of the fact that I was going to come back, and I knew there was a greater purpose and destiny on my life. And I wanted the things of God. And so I was like, somehow, someday, some way, I'm going to win at this. But in the meantime, I'm going to crawl. I'm going to crawl back, because that's all I've got. I'm just going to crawl back to the Father. I'm going to crawl back. And I'm going to be at his feet, and he's going to pick me back up. I know he will. And he did. Every time he would pick me back up and send me what I needed to get back up. But in the midst of that, I lost a lot. Because God would tell me promises and tell me where it is that, he was trying to take me. And by, this age, I will be here. And by that, I'll be married. And by the way, I am single. And so I would be holding on to these promises that the Lord was speaking to my heart. and confirming through my church family and all that. And because of the fact that I was a chronic backslider and there was still darkness happening on my life, right? He wanted to shine the light in my life, but there would be parts of me that still were in darkness, that still was going back to those areas, right? And you can't get in the ring with the enemy, I always say that. You can't get in the ring with the enemy and think you're going to win. And what I mean by that is, whatever your areas of struggle are, you can't expect to go back and have a taste and a bite of your kryptonites and think that you can just come out unscathed and you're going to be fine and you're strong enough to handle it, because it's not true. Remember, your enemy has been playing this game for thousands of years. You think you finna get in there and you haven't even lived a lifetime yet, a human lifetime yet. You're finna get in the ring and you finna go take a bite of something that belongs to him. It belongs to him. You're going to go take a piece and a bite of that, and you think he going to give it to you. It's going to be like he's been tempting you to take it all the time, right? And you go get a piece and a bite of that. You think that when you go take a piece and a bite of that, he's not going to grab you and pull you in. You are deceiving yourself. You're deceiving. You cannot handle it. You're no better than me or anybody else. You can't handle it. God himself tells us you cannot handle it. So when you do that, and you'll be thinking that you're strong enough to get back out and get back on your feet and do, whatever. And the truth of the matter is you're not. And next thing you know, you've fallen because you got back in there with the enemy and decided to play with him. And he's not your friend. He's not your friend, right? And because we have a natural slant towards sin and we're naturally fallen and naturally, we're like pigs in the mud. We love the mud, right? We love the mud, and he's got the mud and we want to go play in the mud, right? And we're like, can't I just go play in the mud without repercussions, without getting dirty? You can't go play in the mud without getting dirty. And so when you get dirty, you got to go run back to the feet of God again so he can clean you up. So he can clean you up again. But the dirt is all stuck in your hair. It's stuck all over you. It's in your nails. You can't get it off. You can't even get it off of you. And next thing you know, you're completely covered in mud. And no matter how much you try to clean yourself, you just can't get clean. And you can't seem to find peace and solace, because with going to play in that mud, there's all these different repercussions that are happening. And so what would happen when you go do that, right? When you go play in that mud, what's happening? Well, if you have promises over here that God is giving you, that requires you to be in a certain space, a certain time, a certain position. And when you miss that because you're over there in the mud, you will miss that promise and you will miss God. And I meet so many people, have met so many people, have had past relationships, boyfriends I can remember, and people, and they will say, God told me that I was going to be this and I remember that, I was supposed to be this and that God said I would do, and it didn't come to pass. And I'll see there be a resentment they have against God, and anger inside of them they'll have against God because they wanted that promise. They believed that promise, kind of like the child, that holds on. And when that promise doesn't come to pass, I see a lot of people walk away from God They walk away from ever wanting a relationship with him again, because it hurt them too bad that they didn't receive what it was that they thought belonged to them and was unconditional. But can I just tell you that a lot of times the things that God is saying to you about your future is conditional. It's conditional on the decisions you make. It's conditional on your discipline. It's conditional on how close you're going to walk with him. It's conditional on whether you're going to walk in the light or walk in the darkness. When you walk in the darkness, you can't see where you're going. You can't see your path, and you end up going the wrong way. When you walk with the light and you walk in the light, God is going to shine the light on your path, and you'll see where you're going. You'll be walking on the path that he set out for you, right? And he will guide your feet along the right path. But if you choose to go over here, right? Because this is the thing. We all will say, I love God. You know what I mean? I'm saved. And a lot of times people don't really understand what all that really means. But, when you really walk with God and you say, I love God, I've accepted him as my Lord and the Savior of my life, okay? The Lord of my life. When someone is the Lord of your life, you are, think about that. If somebody's a Lord over your life, and for the sake of explaining this, not that this would, I don't want this to come off wrong, but let's say somebody's lording over your life, right? Someone lords over your life, you, they make decisions for you. They determine where you're going, what path you go on, and you follow. But the truth of the matter is, a lot of us, how many of us, right, will say out of our mouth, God, I love you. God, I've accepted you as my Lord and Savior. God, you are the Lord of my life, and I love you with all my heart, and you're all I want, right? How many of us say that? But then, God says, okay, let's go. Jesus is walking along the path. He's got the light. You're supposed to be right behind him, following him, right? With your cross. But what happens? If you're looking over here to the left, you're looking over here, right? The left over here. If you're looking to your right, to your left, you're going to miss him. Not just miss him, you won't be able to keep up with him, right? If you're saying I'm following you, but then you say, oh, there goes so and so over there. Let me just go run over there real quick and get, let me just go get that. Let me just go participate in. Let me just go over here. But this is the path that God is on, and you said I'm going over here. If right now you're following somebody in a car, right, or on a bike, and you make a decision to hit a left or a right, and you go do something else, are you still following? Can you even still, you can't still follow. You're not following anymore. You've now gone somewhere else. And for so many of us, that's actually what our path looks like. We're like, yeah, God, Jesus, I believe in you. Right. But it's kind of, I think it's Andrew Womack that gave the analogy that, if your house is on fire and you say, I believe my house is on fire, but then you go take a bath, you go cook dinner, you know what I mean? Do you really believe your house is on fire? Because that would require, out of that comes action, right? You wouldn't believe your house is on fire if you go take a bath, you go cook some food. You don't believe your house is on fire. Either that or you on a suicide mission, one or the other. You don't believe it, right? And so it's the same thing when we say, I believe Jesus died for my sins and is my Lord and my Savior. But then your actions say something else. We need to dig into that, because somewhere in there, you don't believe what you're saying. There's some unbelief happening somewhere. And because belief is an action word. it's an action word. Belief is an action word. And so, sorry, my computer just decided to log me out. But belief is an action word. And so essentially what I'm saying is, in order to really walk with Christ, you have to be following him with your cross, carrying your cross. That's another conversation for another day, but you got to be following him on the path. And when you go another direction, you're no longer following him on the path. And so on that path comes different things. You know, when you get to Right Street, he has this for you. We got to be at Right Street at 2:00 on Friday. Okay. But you went over, on Lefford Street. Now you over there and he's at Right Street at 2:00 and he's looking around. He's like, where are you? You're not here. Where'd you go? I'm here. I'm on time. I got this blessing for you. I got this thing I have for you. I have the next level for you. I have this promise. The promise I gave you. Remember that promise I gave you back in 2012? Yeah, that promise was coming up right now. And you decided to go make a left or a right and parked over there. And I'm not going over there. We have an appointment over here. And now you've missed the appointment. And that was the point of the enemy, was that when he came and tempted you and said, yo, let's go over to Lefford Street. And then you said, bet, let's go. And you went over there. What happens? You lose out on the things that, God had coming up for you. You forfeit it. Because the devil can't take anything from you. He really can't. You have to forfeit it. And he does that by bullying. He does that through many different ways, deceiving you. He can steal it from you, but in order to steal it from you, he had to have a way in. Your door had to be unlocked. Your window had to be open. Your back door had to be open. There had to have been a way he got in, where you opened the door, maybe not to let him in, but you opened the door to go do what you do. And he slid on in there. And when he slid in there, he took some goodies. He took the spoils. He took the spoils of the battle, and he took them with him, and they belonged to you. They had your name on it. And so what happens is you come out having lost the battle and lost your stuff. Lost the things that had your name on it, lost the things that were for you. And that's how you can come out being the chronic loser in the battle. Now, I don't know if that's you. That was me. That was my story. I came out of so many battles, and the enemy got the spoils to everything. You know what I mean? And it was like, I don't want to say everything, but he would get the spoils that belong to me. And it's even worse when we got the spoils. It's one thing if you're living a defeated life and you don't know you don't know that you lost things in the process. I was always fully aware of the stakes, and they were very high, and I would know that whatever promise was in that battle. And I would know when I lost. I would know. And it would be very hard as a person that has a great deal of discernment and has a deep relationship with God, where I communicate with him and he communicates with me, and he would be honest with me. He wouldn't say to me that I lost. But when things didn't come to pass, and when I would notice certain results happening, I would know and be fully aware I lost the battle. And it would leave me so broken and so much in tears and so hurt. I got to a point where I would beat myself up all the time, because it would be like, I can't get anything right. And that became my mindset. I couldn't get anything right. That became my belief that I couldn't get anything right. But how many of you know that that is the perfect place for God to come in and teach you, to come in and help you and rescue you and to teach you the ways of God and his path so that you can be victorious, because God wants you to be victorious more than you want to be victorious. And my desire in my heart that I had to be victorious, he saw it. And even though he knew that my habits were what was defeating me, he knew that that was nothing for him. That's no match for God. He knows how to help you overcome your temptations. And so that was the very first thing that God had me do. He attacked the areas of my temptation so that I could first be strengthened to begin to walk in the light. And then he could teach me how to win the battle. So first I had to learn how to overcome the power of sin. And thank God I was able to do that. He did it one sin by one. I mean, he took his time with me, one stronghold by one. I wasn't one of those people that he knocked all of it out at one time. For me, it would be one season, I'm dealing with this. The next season, I'm dealing with that. I'm dealing with this now this season. And it would be one by one by one by one. And he would teach me how to defeat that specific sin. And then after I was able to defeat the specific sin, he began to give me the tools to overcome in spiritual warfare. And it didn't happen overnight at all. Okay. I can't even say it happened back to back, because there was a span of years after I learned to defeat sin where I still lost battles, because how many of you know that your emotions and participating in emotions that God tells us not to participate in, like anxiety, to be anxious for nothing, like those are commands. It's not just like good counsel, you know what I mean? And so the enemy began to find a way in through my emotions, and because I didn't know how to deploy my weapons, my emotions became my enemy. So no longer were the little worldly sins, pulling me down anymore. It then became, how in the world do I overcome my emotions? How do I overcome when I get anxious? How do I overcome when I get overwhelmed? How do I overcome when I become angry? How do I overcome, these emotions and then not backtrack? Because the emotions overpower you so much, they then cause you to go backwards, right? And maybe you're not doing the same things you used to do, but you're doing things that would it be advantageous to you, and that are stumbling blocks and weights that keep you from progressing, right? And so those things then can cause you to lose the war. And I thank God that he has taught me. Now, does that mean that I'm perfect at spiritual warfare now? No. The saying, new levels, new devils, that's not technically, like, that's not Bible, right? But there is truth in that saying, because as you move up in God, things, you deal with new struggles and new spiritual battles that you never dealt with before in the past. And so as a result, you have to learn how to conquer those things. And it can be tough, right? Because you now might not be able to, the strategy you used, in a past season where, you prayed a specific type of way, or you got up at a specific time for prayer or something, that may not work in this battle, that, you know what I mean, up against this enemy that you have. This enemy is stronger than that enemy. It don't move him. It doesn't move them now. So, you know, it's not helpful. It's not getting you out of this battle. And now you have to deploy another weapon. And so, and I'm not perfect at it, but I'm a lot better, and I've become much stronger at winning battles. And I've been able to defeat a lot of the devils that haunted my life, thankfully, through Christ. And I've been able to overcome emotions. I've been able, like, that took a while, and I'm ministering to you out of that place in some areas, and then in other areas from a completely victorious place. And so, but none of us are gonna be perfect at anything until we reach glory. And the word lets us know that you can become good at things. It's just like with sin. You're gonna sin to the, you know, there are some people that believe that you can get to a place where you don't sin. I won't get into that conversation because that's a very debatable conversation. But, you know, you won't be perfect until you reach glory. You won't. You won't be perfect until you reach glory. You can be a person that reaches a crazy amount of faith. And we know in the Old Testament that God will refer to people. Some people, there's a few people that God will refer to as perfect, but it was referring to their faith. And we know that faith and obedience, they are tied together. And so, but in order to reach that level of glory, right? And in order to reach that the level of perfection God has for us, it's going to happen when we cross the finish line and we get to heaven, right? So we're always learning. Just know that whatever leader you listen to, know that they're, even when they're teaching and they're preaching, you know, to you, whatever they're teaching and they're preaching, even if they've come out on the other side, they're teaching and preaching to you, and they're teaching and preaching to themselves, because it is not them that teach and preach. If they are actually a sent one, it is God that teaches and preaches through them. And they themselves, in a sense, are sitting on the sidelines with you and hearing the word of the Lord come through their mouths, and it is ministering to them, even if they've come out on the other side of it. There's battles waiting on even that leader down the line that they're going to have to cross and deal with, and it's going to hit them in a new way. And they have to be strong enough to know which weapons they need to deploy in God. And sometimes they will miss. But all of it is a learning lesson. None of it is failure. All of it is, if it is failing, it's failing forward, it's progressing, as long as you have the heart of God and the mind of Christ and the determination to keep going. And even when you don't have the determination to keep going, the grace of God and the mercy of God comes and picks you back up, and that thing becomes a learning lesson when you're mentally ready to receive it. So I hope this was helpful to you. I will discuss more bits and pieces of my testimony as I go through this series, and I begin to break down the different topics, you know, and I delve into those topics, and I'll kind of put bits and pieces of my story in there. But I didn't want to inundate you, because I think now we're at girl, guy, whoever. Girl, we are at an hour. Oh man, we're at an hour. So I don't want to hold you any longer. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm so thankful to you for participating. Please subscribe, leave comments, you know, let me know that you enjoyed this and that this was a blessing to you. And until next time, love and light to you. Blessings to you. Come back. Oh, we'll be talking about next time. I think next time I'm going to be talking about what we were before we know Christ, and then what we become when we get to know Christ, and what that means for us in spiritual warfare. I think that's my next topic. And then I think after that, we'll be discussing who we're at war with, and then how we fight battles versus how the world fights battles. Like, I'm going to go through a whole bunch of stuff, okay? Just know that. And at the very end of the series, I am going to discuss the tools to win battles, and the things that are sure ways to lose battles, right? Because it's really important for us to know that. And then I'm also going to dig into the word. I'm not one of those people that don't dig into the word and just talk. I talked today, but I'm very much going to be getting into the word so that, we can see what the word tells us about these battles. And a lot of times we refer to Ephesians only for, just one verse on spiritual warfare. But one thing that you should know that a lot of people don't talk about, at least from what I've seen, is that there is a whole lot of scripture on how to overcome warfare. You have to read between the lines, because a lot of times people don't see it, but there's a lot of goodies in there in the word that tells us how to overcome these battles. And I know, because God used it to help me overcome my battles. So this is ministering to me as well. I hope it ministers to you. And again, grace and peace to you. I can't wait to meet with you again next time.